Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She has a very famous TED Talk. And if you had not listened to it, please try to find it. She has a very famous speech, which is about the danger of a single story. And I think that today and the next days, we are actually talking about it. Like, what is the danger of having one story about a person, about the peoples, about the country? I think this is what we should really try to focus on in the future, about gathering as many stories as possible to avoid the danger of just knowing one story of one people's or one group of people or one person or one country or one ethnicity or one religion, etc.
As explained yesterday, the theme of this year's meeting and the reason why we are here today comes from the need of the Asian Pacific Network to counter or debunk official grand narratives in the region that do not represent the stories, experiences, or needs of communities at large, to bring to the fore the voices of victims, women, youth, and ethnic and religious minorities in order to create alternative, more inclusive, and egalitarian national and regional historical narratives. Transformative Documentation, the title and the topic of this week's meetings, aims to be a stepping stone to achieve this mission.
You cannot have a trial and accuse people of crimes without presenting any evidence to that, and therefore you need the documentation. The crimes of the Nazis were numerous and unspeakable. However, in a court, you have to be very precise. You have to name dates, you have to name places, you have to name the names of those people who committed or allegedly committed the crimes. You need to show evidence how certain incidents might have happened. And so a lot of knowledge that we have today about the crimes of the Nazis is because of the work of the Nuremberg trials. If you look at today at the development of international criminal law, the fact that there was the ICTY, the ICTR, those tribunals I mentioned before in my presentation, and the ICC today, that was hugely influenced by the trials in Nuremberg. Without them, they wouldn't have happened like they are today.
But by expandination of the violation, which is the uprising in Syria moved from territory, province to other province and cities. Based on this expandination of the uprising, the violation also expanded. So the manual work became actually very difficult. So we move ahead toward the technical program, and we build a complex technical program which has enabled us to store all of those word files automatically in the program. The program those programs build on MySQL language, and we don't need any more to enter the data in or the files in the data. The program is reading those files and automatically store it and distribute it based on the province, gender, types of violation.
If I had been asked what human rights violations documentation was and entailed, I would have naively responded that it is just recording accurately human rights violations. Full stop. That's how simple I would have responded. And then I've come to understand that it's much more. It can be a powerful tool in knowledge production, societal contestation, education on human rights abuses and the importance of fighting impunity, including different voices, furthering specific transitional justice mechanisms, such as the use of archives for the evidentiary foundation in criminal trials. It could be a powerful tool for in advocating for victims and a complementary way of dealing with the past.
En esa representación de las ausencias, en el lugar donde deberían estar 70 rollizos, se extraen simbólicamente 70 de ellos y se colocan en su lugar 70 mosaicos, que representan a cada uno de estos hombres que se recuerdan y que fueron construidos en su mayoría por familiares, con lo cual cada uno de estos mosaicos tienen particularidades que no solo se enfocan en ese acto violento de su detención ilegal y de ejecución, sino que da cuenta de la identidad de la comuna en líneas generales, pero que también en particular nos habla de qué era relevante para cada uno de ellos, qué le gustaba, cuáles eran sus sueños, cuáles eran sus anhelos, y todo ese disfrute, esa cotidianidad que cada una de nosotras y nosotros destacamos y relevamos y que podríamos hacer igual con uno de nuestros familiares.
The construction of memory boxes, or otherwise called aesthetics of the oppressed, where we provide the victims, survivors of the victims, with training on building a small wooden box, draw them according to their own artistic tastes, and paint them the way they like it. And then they put all the personal memorials of their family members who have been killed and hand it over to AHRDO as the organization in charge of the memorialization process. So after those memory boxes are completed, there will be a memory box exhibition where members of their communities, members of civil society, media, human rights group, they come to that exhibition and they engage with the family members of those victims, empathize with them, and encourage with them to stay engaged with the process.
So about 4 years ago, we started a project to support the families of the missing, to facilitate their participation in the search for the missing. So we developed together with partners an accompaniment project with a psychosocial approach to support and also empower the families in their efforts to establish the fate of their loved ones. So the project includes home visits, information meetings, and psychosocial group sessions that lead to memorialization activities such as the Empty Chairs Waiting Family Project. And in this project, family members supported with art therapists and psychologists design and paint a chair in remembrance of the missing person. So the project started in 2016, and these empty chairs symbolize the empty spaces that the people who went missing left behind. So each one of them is the creative work of the family. Most of them had never even had a paintbrush before. And they wanted to, through the designs and the paintings they did on the chair, to reflect the stories and the personalities of the missing loved one and all the memories they have of them. The different communities develop over time different narratives about the impact of the war. So online memorials help share experiences of those different communities that show that the impact in reality was similar on all communities. And it was also, and still is, an opportunity for the young generation to learn about Lebanon's wars and to have a better understanding of how the past shapes our present and hopefully ensure guarantees of non-recurrence of violence.
So when a few Tibetans who managed to escape into exile, actually they carried a very little with them. Most of those actually carried only some like manuscripts and some like edible things which they had to manage while coming into exile. Very small thing that they actually carried with them. They were also sold out during their initial day in exile in order to survive their family. However, like through this community reach out, we managed to collect good number of objects in this last 2 years, and we started building this object-based new museum. And right now, we are very much looking forward to open the new museum in early 2021. And today, we are very proud to tell others that all our collection, which we have in our museum, are like 99% being donated by the Tibetan populace in exile.
The Rohingya Documentation Initiative, which is intended to support the Rohingya communities and civil society in developing their their own concepts and strategies and tools for transitional justice in a moment when transitional justice is not completely in place. So in a preparation for a future or a coming accountability process, and also for truth-telling and many other aspects of transitional justice, which are anyway applicable to the Rohingya communities, despite the unfortunate condition that the mechanisms for transitional justice are not in place due to the circumstances. Research in the camps, and that was held throughout 1 year with our partners of this program, which I'll introduce in a moment. And one of the main findings of this preliminary needs assessment was that one of the most important needs was to provide the Rohingya with tools, capacities, and support to develop their own strategies for transitional justice and to start preparing their documentation, their own documentation.
In the months that followed the atrocities and the mass displacement, we really witnessed this huge flurry of activity of documentation efforts in the camps in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, where mainly international organizations really rushed to try to capture in some way the scale and the scope of the human rights abuses and the atrocities that had been committed and how these events had unfolded. But what was missing from this initial period was any kind of locally led effort. So the Rohingya groups themselves collecting and collating what was effectively their own information. And so that's where we believe this initiative steps in to fill a gap. And it's different from other documentation efforts because it seeks to train local documenters, both Rohingya and Bangladeshi, on how to credibly collect information about human rights abuses and atrocities in Rakhine State that can best contribute to future justice and accountability efforts and try to prevent future atrocities and support eventual transitional justice and truth-telling processes.
We've seen that helping documenters by giving them trauma-sensitive skills is very important. We also saw that it's crucial to offer support to documenters who usually come from the same communities as the victims who are supposed to be interviewed, okay? So these documenters do get traumatized through hearing the traumatic stories of the victims. So we help give them skills to manage victims' reactions and their own trauma reactions. We've also learned the importance of working with local organizations who provide support to their communities. And we do this through strengthening their skills so that victims who they work with can start their healing journeys. We also help them strengthen their local advocacy and help create a network of referral for victims. We also work with victims in individual and community levels.
So in this picture, you can see when they were asked to raise their hands if they have a loved one who was missing and disappeared or killed, and if they wanted to speak with the FAFG team about their victim, they all said they wanted to. So there is a need for this.
The United Nations has estimated that thousands, they don't have the exact number, but thousands of Rohingyas have perished this year trying to seek life in other countries by risking their lives at the sea. In the past month, the government of Bangladesh has relocated over 1,000 people to the remote island with estimates of more. And then here in Indonesia, we've had more than 500 Rohingya arrive in our shores in Aceh, barely surviving the trip here. And the government here is providing as much support as possible, but it's still very hard. So we also need to respond to this ongoing situation, not only what happened in the past, but what's happening now, and begin the conversation with governments and donors that we need to start talking about third country resettlement for the Rohingya. And while we're continuing this longer journey of all of us and memorializing this situation, this could be equally met with how we can improve their current life as well.
Where does fighting impunity stops and prevention begins in a country like this? And most recently, it was this institution that revealed that one of the most powerful persons in this country, the prime minister, the Bosnian political system is very complicated, but let's just say, for the purposes of this conversation, the chief executive of the part of the country that's predominantly Serb now, was actually himself involved in the massacre at Srebrenica. And he was actually never questioned by the office of the prosecutor. So what we did, we dug through our archives, we found testimonies, we found intercepted telephone conversations, we found other related documents, and we made it available to the media. Now, it was only after that our office of the prosecutor actually launched an investigation into this gentleman. Now, that's the kind of thing that we do here. Unfortunately, with many similar events, similar to Bosnia, occurring elsewhere, and the focus and the attention shifting, it didn't really cause the kind of uproar internationally or even regionally as I was hoping. But this is the kind of thing that we do. The one good thing about this place is that it's actually based and built on documentation. It's based and built on forensic evidence. The documentation that exists has become available and we have come into its possession. I mean, it's become public as a result of criminal prosecution. Now, the problem is that what's publicly available is a few 100,000 documents and statements, but that's only just, and we now have in excess of 100,000 of those documents, orders, instructions, witness statements, video clips, and so on. But the problem is that it's only the tip of the iceberg, because most of the evidence, and this is another battle that we're fighting, most of the evidence is kept under lock and key in The Hague at the ICTY, and the public of Bosnia and Herzegovina is never going to see it. We're never even going to see digitized copies of it.
Yes, there are quite a few constraints that we usually face in documenting the atrocities. One of the basic challenge that we usually face is doing the documentation in a proper way, because the institution, the center itself, is a volunteer-run organization. So there are so many students are coming up from different universities, from different disciplines. So they actually volunteer here, and we actually lack the knowledge of decoding, proper decoding, or preparing a database. So this is one challenge, I would say, while we document and collect all the information and then process. So this is one challenge. And there is another challenge, I would say, in the camp areas. There are quite a few things that we need to take care of. One of the issues is the language barriers, because the Rohingya language and the Bengali language is very different from each other. So whenever we are going to do the documentation, then we have to hire the interpreters to understand the whole scenario and to communicate with a particular Rohingya respondent. Then there is another problem that is usually when we try to take the interviews into the camp areas, then most of the cases, the family members of the particular respondent try to create a barrier, I would say, and this creates a very big issue for the researchers and the interviewers. So especially it becomes very difficult when we are actually taking interviews of the victims of sexual violence, because still it's a taboo, and the families actually don't want to express their own opinions and don't want to expose that particular family member into public, what she has faced or suffered. This is another thing. And then due to the shift of the communities within different camp areas, like when we started our research in 2017, the particular suppose a particular group used to live in a particular camp, and then in 2018 we could not find that particular families over there, and they were actually shifted into another camp. So it's very difficult for us to do the follow-ups with the respondents. So far we have been interviewed.
Fill in the blank, please. I know my advocacy is effective when.
I know my advocacy is effective when I'm being personally attacked by nationalist press. And, you know,
I know my advocacy is effective when it serves the victims a pathway to be empowered socially and legally, and at the same time when it fulfills the objective of ending impunity in the world.
I think we all agree that it's very interesting to hear other countries' experience, and we learned a lot from all these experiences. I just want maybe to mention one example that one experience, the project presented by Ghulam on the memory box from Afghanistan actually directly inspired us in Lebanon to develop the CHAIRS project that was presented by my colleague Sabine Saliba. So it's based on one of the presentations during a regional meeting from the coalition that we learned from this project in Afghanistan, and that we started a discussion with the group there, and we developed our CHAIRS project in Lebanon. So just to show how it is very useful, all these meetings are very useful, and was very useful for us. I also wanted to say that the training on documentation was also very useful. I think documentation work is very, very challenging, and we need more capacity building. So thank you for this training as well.
We learned a lot during 4 days from the presentation, the experience that different of our colleagues from different regions also, and then interact and share with us. So these lessons or this learning, and then I can also point out that, you know, the documentation process is always the same. It's always the same, but though it is in different contexts. So like also I'm really happy that I learned more about what one of my colleagues, Naren, also from Bangladesh, also shared with us on how they also, implemented their projects on documentation of the sexual-based violence, which their target was also to engage with the victim of rapes and other related human rights violations. So this is also very important, though there is a lot of challenges that they face during implementation. I hope they win as far as then they achieve most of the projects desires in the field. So,
personally, I have learned a lot from these 4 days. Yes, I have attended some of the sessions, but I took several notes out of the sessions. They cover a wide range of topics, and these notes will help us in our work in the network for the MENA region. What I have learned is that the possibility between of the communication between the different networks under the umbrella of the coalition, the Middle East and North Africa network can get benefit of communication with the Africa network, Latin America network, and Asia and Pacific network. And we can strengthen and enhance and foster the relationship between the networks. And this opportunity was so important through this application, through Zoom. And we hope in the future we can build a face-to-face relationship between the networks. We need to create a mechanism of communication between the different networks.
This is not only documenting the past, this is also an opportunity to give voice to the victims and also connect them with the new generation and make the experience intergenerational. And so the documentation is very much part of memorialization, the part of the coalition's core philosophy and work. And we are hopeful that if we can do it in a coordinated way, in a very, with taking into the experience of the experts and from other sites and countries, this can be really a exercise, not only supporting the Rohingya community, but the global struggle for peace, justice, tolerance, and harmony